COVID-19 cases surging in China, stadiums turn to makeshift fever clinics, and concerns about new variants running high. One man and a Twitter handle becoming an overnight sensation amid China's nationwide protests. He shares his story and the dangers he's faced. Expectations for China's growth plummeting to their lowest in decades. Foreign investors offloaded $100 billion worth of Chinese bonds in 10 successive months. Apple going ahead with its move out of China. The tech giant securing a site in Vietnam to make its Macbook computers. And Taiwan seeing another round of visitors. A U.S. congressional delegation visiting the island, alongside lawmakers from Europe. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Before we turn to today's news, we have an announcement about our December 15th episode. In that one, we sat down with Brad Good, an American businessman, to hear about his first-hand experiences from China since 1988, and to talk about his project, the China Declaration, a global push to end the Chinese Communist Party. The China Declaration is based on the Declaration of Independence. It details the transgressions the Chinese Communist Party has made against the Chinese people and other countries. The Declaration asks a simple question: do you believe the Chinese Communist Party must be defeated? During that episode, an incorrect website was shown on screen. The correct website where you can go to sign the declaration is the ChinaDeclaration.com. We regret the error. Cities across China are scrambling to install hospital beds and build makeshift fever clinics. That's as international concern is growing about Beijing's surprise change in its COVID-19 policy, and that the move might trigger new virus mutations. Here's more.
This stadium in Beijing has been turned into a makeshift fever clinic, as authorities in China reported 5 more deaths. It is one of hundreds of similar centers that are being added to major cities. China this month began dismantling its stringent zero-COVID regime of lockdowns and testing after protests against curbs. Now, as the virus sweeps through a country of 1.4 billion people who lack natural immunity, having been shielded for so long, there is growing concern about possible deaths, virus mutations, and the impact on the economy and trade. Xu Wenbo, an official with the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, told reporters new mutations would occur, but played down concerns. He added that the possibility of new strains becoming more lethal is low. International concern is also growing over Beijing's surprise decision to let the virus run free. U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said on Monday the potential for the virus to mutate as it spreads in China was a threat for people everywhere.
The toll of the virus is of concern to the rest of the world, given the size of China's GDP, given the size of China's economy.
Speaking at the same news conference as Xu, the head of Peking University First Hospital's Infectious Disease Department, Wang Guiqiang, said only deaths caused by pneumonia and respiratory failure after contracting COVID would be classified as COVID deaths. Heart attacks or cardiovascular disease causing death of infected people will not get that classification. In total, China has reported just 5,242 COVID deaths since the pandemic emerged in late 2019, a very low toll by global standards. But there are rising doubts that the statistics are reflecting the true impact of a disease ripping through cities after China dropped curbs on December 7th. Since then, some hospitals have become inundated, pharmacies emptied of medicines. Many people have gone into self-imposed lockdowns. Some health experts estimate 60% of people in China, equivalent to 10% of the world's population, could be infected over the coming months, and that more than 2 million could die.
China only classifies deaths caused by pneumonia and respiratory failure as COVID-19 deaths, while every deceased person in the U.S. who tested positive for the virus gets counted as a COVID-19 death. Next, we zoom in on the story of a 30-year-old Chinese man and how, through his Twitter account, he became one of the most important conduits of information as recent protests sparked across China.
As China's historic protests against COVID-19 curbs erupted in late November, a Twitter handle named Teacher Lee is Not Your Teacher became an overnight sensation. The account and the man behind it reposted details and footage of protests from across China, skirting China's online censorship from his home in Italy.
Even in some small cities and in local neighborhoods, people were demanding lockdowns be lifted. Things happen far beyond what we have seen. It's just that much has gone unreported.
Lee's posts largely reached a more tech-savvy generation of young Chinese. They're using virtual private networks, or VPNs, to circumvent China's Great Firewall and access uncensored content on platforms banned in China, like Twitter and Instagram. He says much of his content was sent to him and that he got thousands of messages per day.
In the past, Chinese people weren't willing to express themselves because they knew it's very dangerous. For example, when you type some high-profile people's names online, you would be interviewed by the police. This time, we have seen many people chanting in front of the police. All the grievances that have been suppressed for so long would also drive people to express themselves.
Lee is a painter and former art teacher from Anhui province in eastern China. He explained that during the height of the protests, he was posting every few minutes and sometimes only got 2 hours of sleep per night. His followers skyrocketed from 140,000 in mid-November to over 860,000 now.
This account has become a symbol of the Chinese people's pursuit of freedom of speech. It represents the things we need to know and the things we want to know. It represents our right to know.
The protests have been credited for China's recent easing of COVID-19 restrictions. Some also called for China's ruling communist regime and leader Xi Jinping to step down. Demonstrations have calmed amid a heavy police presence and some protesters getting arrested. China's foreign ministry has said rights and freedoms must be exercised lawfully. Lee says his efforts have made him vulnerable, receiving death threats, while his family back home has been questioned by police.
The most important thing is not my life, but the security of this account. Even though this account is no longer safe, or it is deleted or something else, the awareness of people to speak, to express themselves has started.
He adds that people in China can go home now that lockdowns have lifted.
Right now, I am a person without a future.
Despite this, he says he's determined to keep going.
The World Bank is cutting its growth outlook for China again, citing the pandemic and ongoing property sector weakness. In a report released on Tuesday, the World Bank lowered its expectations for China's economic growth to 2.7% for this year. If the prediction proves accurate, it would mark China's worst performance in nearly half a century. China set the same target at 5.5%. A survey by World Economics shows China's business confidence has fallen to its lowest in 10 years. What's more, foreign investors cut Chinese bonds for 10 months in a row, offloading more than $100 billion worth. Over in Silicon Valley, Apple is taking another step towards its out-of-China production goal. According to Japanese newspaper Nikkei Asia, for the first time ever next year, Apple will begin producing some of its Macbook computers in Vietnam. And its assembly partner Foxconn could begin assembling devices there as soon as May. Once production begins there, the tech giant will be capable of producing all of its main products outside China. That is, iPhones in India and MacBooks, Apple Watches, and iPads in Vietnam. Apple has been trying to increase the reliability of its supply chain, which leans heavily on China. That effort comes amid ongoing geopolitical and health challenges in the country. The former United States trade representative says Washington's China policy needs to change and that an incremental shift is not enough. Robert Lighthizer made the comments in a guest essay to the New York Times on Saturday. In the article, he shares his take on why he believes a shift in how the U.S. deals with the communist regime is needed. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo recently proposed an incremental shift away from reliance on China. In contrast to those remarks, Lighthizer suggested adopting explicit policy of strategic decoupling. He explained it wouldn't be a total decoupling, but one that should be done over time and in an organized way. He described it as necessary to make sure U.S.-China relations stay beneficial to America. Highlighting Beijing's aggression toward Taiwan, its arming of the South China Sea, friendship with Russia, and efforts to build overseas military outposts, Lighthizer wrote that Washington must prepare both economically and militarily. He noted that the U.S. should encourage mutually beneficial dealings, like trading agriculture, raw materials, and some consumer and pharmaceutical goods, and discourage harmful aspects, like importing computers, cars, and telecom gear. Lighthizer also called for disentangling U.S. technology from China, as well as shutting down apps like TikTok that mine user data and push influence or propaganda. He emphasized the goal would be to help the U.S. not to punish China or to hold it back, though he noted that China is not an ally, but an adversary bent on world dominance. A steady stream of visitors are arriving in Taiwan. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen met with two delegations on Tuesday from Capitol Hill in Washington and the European Union.
The prosperity of Taiwan is a bipartisan, bicameral issue important to all of us.
I must avail myself of this opportunity to thank the U.S. Congress. Congress has upheld the U.S. security commandment to Taiwan and helped to defend our democracy.
Congress recently passed legislation that will finance weapon sales and authorize arms transfers to Taiwan. Tsai also met with lawmakers from the EU.
The fact that I am here today is a testament to the importance that the European Union places on the relationship between the European Union and Taiwan.
The delegation leader reiterated that the EU opposes China's threat of using force or economic coercion against Taiwan. The European Union has been courting the island, which produces virtually all of the globe's most cutting-edge semiconductors. Taiwan-based company TSMC is the world's largest contract microchip maker. It had said last year it would review a potential expansion into Germany. Beijing is often riled when foreign delegations visit Taiwan. It claims the island is part of China's territory, despite the Chinese Communist regime never having ruled Taiwan. A major Apple supplier is likely facing a heavy fine coming from Taiwan's government. Taiwanese company Foxconn is said to have made an investment in a Chinese microchip maker without permission from authorities. Here's more on the details.
Foxconn assembles iPhones and is the world's largest contract electronics producer. It previously disclosed investments in Chinese microchip conglomerate Tsinghua Unigroup, but announced late last week that it would sell all its shares, worth over $770 million. But the Taiwanese government responded to the plan, saying it would fine Foxconn because the company didn't get permission from Taiwanese authorities back when it bought the shares. According to earlier media reports, the fine could top $800 million if sanctioned. Taiwan has been tightening legislation to prevent what it calls China's theft of its microchip technology. According to Taiwanese law, the government can prohibit investments in China based on national security and industrial development considerations. The Chinese chip company Tsinghua Unigroup plays a major role in the Chinese Communist regime's ambition to be self-sufficient in producing semiconductors. Last year, the company found itself buried under $30 billion in debt. Another Beijing-backed company later offered assistance, pouring billions of dollars into Tsinghua to help it avoid bankruptcy.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. What role is China playing in the Middle East? The first China-Arab summit from earlier this month highlights Beijing's growing influence in the region, known for its oil.
Since the Chinese are seeking to dominate and seeking to control, anybody else who is seeking to destabilize stable areas and stable governments so that Chinese influence can come in and take over, that's something the Chinese are going to support.
We sat down with Rabbi Yaakov Menken, Managing Director of the Coalition for Jewish Values, to find out more. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Apple TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.